Transforming light is what I'm calling this because it has something of the dynamic nature of light and window and that transforming quality that that occurs when we are inside and experiencing some of the great delight that is so much ours. Okay, now I'm pressing a button. Okay, here we are inside, and as you see, looking at the west direction, that's number 2. We're going to begin on the south window, and then we're going to go to the west, and then we're going north. And we'll start on the bottom over here and go up. And isn't it interesting, the great design factor of the people who designed this church building, that they made it look like it continues from the lower floor all the way up there to the top floor and makes what we call a lancet window, that pointed window at the top, and then it comes all the way down. Well, when you go outside, you'll see that there's a strip that kind of separates the top from the bottom. But overall, it looks like very much like the Gothic period. And then up top, we have these round windows that are the rose windows, and it looks like they're all floating on top the little points of those lancet windows. Well, we'll go ahead and begin on the lower floor on the left and begin with that one. One of my big questions, and I've lived with this question for decades now, is what in the world does art do in a church? And what role does it play? And how are we to experience it in some way as people of faith? So we're going to be discovering that as we move from window to window. And here's our lower window on the south side. And I think that a lot of people miss this one because we usually come in from the center aisle. But here we go, transforming light, the window as metaphor. Metaphor, well, remember now, we're talking about looking at this window when the light is shining in. So the light becomes a metaphor for the presence of God, perhaps, in some people, or the illuminating spirit, or some kind of high energy that pierces the window without breaking it. And when it does that, this whole window just transforms the light inside. We're no longer in darkness, but we aren't in pure light, we are in transformed light. It's many colors, many shapes, many symbols that are part of that. And what I'm going to do today is use that metaphor of presence and think about Jesus' teachings, because these windows are chock full of little nuggets that all kind of harken back to biblical references and ideas and concepts that are part of Jesus' presence for these many years. When I do that, we're going to ask all kinds of questions about them and maybe get some new insights about it as well. One thing that's really interesting to me is how that window is broken up into many parts. And I tell you, if you think that the church is only a church that has its own history, you're wrong. We go back in church life and in church thought all the way back through the Middle Ages and further into those first years of the Christian church. And in this one in particular, we see a really, I think it's what the Duecento in Italy. Duccio's Gothic frame is really kind of calls into play the kind of window decoration we have in this way. Look at all the small individual parts. And one sort of big one, but then up, it comes up into these great kind of pinnacles at the top. And when we look at our decoration, check it out. Aren't those same kind of pinnacles that are at the top of this Good Shepherd's theme? And you look up there and you say, oh yeah, we've got a Gothic church that we're part of when we look at the windows. And so each little segment now winds up being kind of announced to us as if it were some kind of truth that comes out of the Middle Ages even, and has lived with us now into our present time. Well, I'm going to look at that first window, and I want to look first of all at the three central panels. And in the center, we see Good Shepherd. And what a great image that is. And we look underneath that image and see this little plaque. It's all right on the window, and that's Reverend Clapp. Now, Reverend Clapp in the 19th century was evidently a very instrumental person in helping the edifice, our building, to be built, not the windows, but the building. And so his role has been memorialized by this particular image. And this makes me ask a second big question. When I think about windows and art in the church, do they express faith or do they pronounce some sort of doctrinal idea? Okay, hold that question in your mind, because an expression of faith is really based on trust. I think somebody mentioned that even in our discussion. Trust is faith, and so expressing that faith is one thing, but proclaiming or pronouncing a doctrine, that's a doctrine is something like Jesus is God. That's a doctrinal statement, and it's one we proclaim. But it's different to say that that's an expression of our faith, because an expression would be, we're really involved in this and understand the significance of Jesus' teaching, and this image is an expression of that kind of trust that we have in God. So hold that kind of back and forthing, because from time to time we're going to ask, well, is this expression or is it proclamation? And usually some people will say proclamation, others will say, no, it's expression of faith, and you get to choose. Well, let's look at this first in terms of the Jesus holding the sheep and checking that out. And as we do, you'll notice that there are two figures on the side, and they are the angelic presence. What in the world are they doing there? We might say, well, okay, let's look underneath first of all. And when we do look underneath, we get some idea. Whoop, oh, I'm gonna go back and talk about something else first. When we check out all of these images, we got to deal with a thing called iconography. And iconography is what we find out when we ask questions about the story or the event that take place in the picture. We think about this location, the nature of buildings or the place or space. We think about people, the plants, the animals, the objects, the features and gestures, the colors and textures, and the symbols and signs. Now, if you're going to read a window, you have to be able to read all of it. Not just Jesus is a good shepherd, but we want to say, what does the rest of that represent, right? Not just one thing, but all things. So that's the visual thinking we're involved with. And here's the other thing that happens. We put that list over there on the left, but look at what's on the right. This community context, that's First Congregational UCC. What does that church think about the story? What does that church think about the location and the objects and the colors and the symbols? So we have a little community context, and it's about 1894 that Mr. Clapp, Reverend Clapp, helped us get this building built. And then the Povey windows are added a little later and finished in 1910. So that really dates the community thought. Second thing we've got to deal with is memorization. When we look at Jesus and the Good Shepherd, what do we associate with that we've memorized? Have we memorized Jesus said, I am the Good Shepherd? Yes, now we have it. Or have we memorized a whole passage that illuminates why in the world, when in the world, how in the world did Jesus ever talk about being the Good Shepherd? Those are very different thoughts, and they convey a whole different way of reading that story. If you've not memorized, probably you've allowed yourself to be doctrinal about it and not understood the big full story, which gives a little bit more of the faith and trust aspect of the meaning of that window. Does that make sense? Because now we come down to faith versus belief and the windows. Faith really is that trust that enables us to see the big story and understand the fuller implications of it, not just the isolated belief Jesus is the Good Shepherd. When we have faith and express a trust, we expand, we breathe, we take in the whole thing, and it becomes a part of who we are in relationship to this story, not just the narrow statement. The last thing on my list in the green box is free association and learned association. When you look at that window, Jesus and the Good Shepherd, more than likely you have some free associations that come to mind. Things like, good shepherds. Shepherds. I thought back then, I thought they were a low-class person. I thought shepherds smelled. I thought sheep smelled. I thought, what in the world does this possibly mean, etc. Right? You might have other free associations, like when you first heard that Jesus was a good shepherd and you love sheep, and so as a child, you might have heard that, and that's a free association, you see? And those come and be with us. Now you come to the learned association, and of course I say that has to do with the iconographical source of the story, which is the biblical reference, which, well, you probably ought to go back to the book in John and reread it and get the big picture of the intended message that's there. So, iconographic source, and we're going to play with these. Written materials, past art objects. Ooh, did the art of the church in the 17th, 16th, 12th century, 5th century, 3rd century, did they have images of Jesus as a good shepherd? Well, you see, that would be past objects that would influence the iconography. And then, of course, the third part of the three-legged stool is your perceptions, gaining insights and reflecting on them. and using those insights to read the windows. Okay, let's go back to the image. In the center, I am the good shepherd. Now, is that a proof text to help us believe Jesus is God, the only good shepherd in the world? Well, tell the people who dedicated the window and they will soon tell you, no, we thought Reverend Clapp was a pretty good shepherd too, because we've adopted that image, that idea of good shepherd, and thought that, hey, sometimes ministers are good shepherds too, right? Oh, and sometimes we might be able to take that message of being a good shepherd and embody that in ourselves as we are good lay people in the church, and we might shepherd and care for and express the love and affection and watch care over one another as well. So it's not just Jesus and not just Reverend Clapp, but it's also other people in the dynamic faith community. Or it's Jesus alone who's the good shepherd. And let me tell you that that doctrinal kind of statement comes with these two angels on the right and the left. Look at what's on the nameplate, on the little plate underneath them. The one on the left says, "We adore thee, we worship thee," and that comes right out of the Psalms. The iconographic written source is the Psalms. And then the image on the right, "We magnify thy holy name," Psalm 40. And so you get those kind of things breathing into and making a big, huge deal out of Jesus being the good shepherd. So that's a doctrinal affirmation. And I think you get the picture now. Now, I wanted to show you something a little, my interest in art goes to non-Christian art. And look at this, a sound box from ancient Iraq, 2600 BCE. And there's a little story box decoration on the front underneath that beard of the bull, and there it is. You see that? One image on the left and on the right and left, and this central figure who is a God king. Now, see we call this the heraldic composition, where two on the side press in and hold the center figure as the most important figure in the entire world. Now, that was true in ancient Iraq. And what do you think? Would that come forward in next generations of artistic decoration? You betcha. How about this for the early Christian reference to Jesus as Good Shepherd? On the catacomb ceiling, we see on the left side, we see Jesus in the center, no beard, goat on his shoulders, and two sheep, a sheep and a goat on the left and right there. But there you have the notion of that heraldic composition. Those two wonderful birds up top as well, giving focus to the Good Shepherd of the Priscilla catacomb. And you see the parallel in our concept of those two angels on the right and the left. But that central figure now is Jesus as is. I wanted to show you something here. When we talk about the iconographical source, it's not just the words, but it's also the image. Was there a direct iconographical source of Jesus as Good Shepherd, art-wise? Check out this painting on the left, Bernard Plockhorst. Ever hear of him? Well, if you're a 19th century scholar, you probably did, But he developed this image of Jesus as Good Shepherd, and Povey stole it. Check it out. Do you see how exact it is? Except for the reverse of the colors of the garment, right? Check it out. The red, whoop, it's kind of a dirty blue. Oh, and the cloak around, it's a blue. Oh, no, it's a red on the right. So he's just reversed the colors, but he kept the sheep with the leg hanging down, and Jesus checking them out, and the sheep on the left and on the right, they're the same. There's even a lake in the background in both. See that? Now, what do you think about Povey stealing, copying an image directly and just changing it a little bit? Well, that's part of the iconic tradition. For years and years, we have been doing that in the church, copying how Jesus looks and various images and presentations of him. But our particular painting on the windows is 1910, and this painting by Plockhorst is 1878. So you see, I think the Poveys took these images that were prevalent during their time, 19th century, and took those and used them in various ways in representing, representing Jesus in this kind of image. But look what Povey did. Instead of that clear sky in the background, now you have this wonderful, beautiful sky that is all pure Portland, right? Well, sometimes. And so you get a delightful, much more interesting, warm, romantic kind of presentation of Jesus in the landscape. Okay, I have, if you were back in the 5th century, this would have been Jesus and sheep. Pretty different, huh? Or if you had been in the 19th century, you might have also found a really nice shepherdess leading some sheep. And you know, this is part of what happened during the 19th century. Rather than doing only Jesus as Good Shepherd, they really saw the beauty and wonder of the land and the art and the all of what was France and the whole experience of taking care of animals and shepherding. They saw that as one of the most beautiful opportunities for enlightening and caring for the wonders of creation and the life that one lives responsibly in the world. Okay, now look, Jesus as Good Shepherd in the center in the heraldic composition. So he's lifted as if he is not only himself, but at least he is Reverend Clapp, for whom it is dedicated. And on the left and on the right are two things that represent Jesus' teaching. Good master on the left, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And on the right, we have seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you. So what I'm going to do is I want to go left first. Now, iconography, check out the eyes. Well, you can see them on the right. Jesus is looking right at the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler, his eyes are diverted. Is he following the hands of Jesus? Or is he, if you know the full story, sadly turning away from the teaching that Jesus wants him to have? Hands, well, check out Jesus' hands. They suggest that we look off to Jesus' right. Look at the hand of the rich young ruler, and it looks like it's moving off to the other direction. So you get this kind of difference, and you have to read those and feel them. Check out their clothes. Does he look like a rich young ruler? Nice hat, huh? Check out Jesus. Well, he's got the familiar red, which we've seen in the Good Shepherd, so it's easy to identify his red versus the lighter red in the rich young ruler. Where is the location? Well, the location seems to be in a building of some sort made of stone, but it's in the country, and we see that. And we look up and we say, oh, there's a roof. Well, that's interesting. Looks like it has a hole in it. Needs some repair. Okay, and then we look at that whole space of the paint picture in the window, and it's compressed so that we are able to focus on Jesus and the rich young ruler. Now, where do you think Povey got this picture, or the idea of this picture? Oh, Heinrich Hoffmann. Ever hear of him? 19th, early 20th century painter of the stories of Jesus. And check out Jesus' hands and the ruler's hands, same positioning, right? Check out the hat. Oh, looks like familiar. Little different garment. Now, Jesus' hands are pushing out toward his right, our left, and there's somebody else in that there. See that? Now, those other people are precisely who Jesus was telling the rich young ruler, if he wanted to have eternal life, you know what he had to do? Give up everything he had to the poor, and you shall have eternal life. Oh my goodness. Would the window leave out that very important part of the story? Yes, it would, except for the roof. Remember that roof and how the roof had a hole in it? Now we understand that that roof with a hole in it was in reference to the poverty that existed in his time, and so he should pay attention to it, right? Okay, now you got the idea of how we're reading the iconography in relationship to the story on the one hand, and to the limited nature of storytelling in a window. And we also see that Povey got the image pretty much directly from Heinrich Hoffmann, who did this in 1889. Povey did the windows and finished them in 1910. On the far right, we have this other image of Jesus teaching. And he's teaching, oh, look at his notes in the left hand. Isn't that nice? Roll of the notes that evidently helped Jesus remember the Sermon on the Mount. And so we would do it with a book today, but he wrote it out, evidently, at least the suggestion. And so the Sermon on the Mount is all in there, and Jesus is teaching it verbatim, no doubt. And so it's pretty interesting to me that the limit of what's presented is in the window bottom. You see in that little the word there is only seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. But depending on your memorization, depending on your awareness, you fill in the blank and say, no, he's really referring to the greater story, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, which is the Sermon on the Mount. And that window represents the whole thing. It's not just a little bit of it, but the little bit opens up to the whole. And that is precisely the value of iconography. Come to this with your memory, or else let this suggest the more that you have to think about. Now, the other thing that interests me is this picture right, this part of the picture right over there on the right. What in the world is that there for? And we might say, well, it looks a little like the church. Not our church, but nope. It's actually a Roman temple. And it has the Ionic columns. It has the little porch and the pediment and the steps that lead right up to the porch. That is the formulaic temple type in ancient Rome. Well, I found something. I found that temple. I was looking around and thought, where in the world is that temple anyway? And lo and behold, it's the Garni Temple in Armenia, which was excavated in the 19th century. Now remember, 19th century is where Hoffman and Plockhorst came out of. Well, Povey's as well. And while Povey did the painting or did the windows in 1910, he certainly could have been aware of this particular temple's excavation in Armenia. And it stands as a really fascinating symbol, because look at who the god was to whom this temple was dedicated. The god Mir, M-I-H-R, the god of light and heaven. Now, isn't it interesting that somehow we get this a kind of effort in the window to do exactly what the Apostle Paul did in some of his sermons, where he said, see the ancient God, see the way the gods were. Well, let me tell you about our God. Yeah, you know, so here's this contrast, and putting Jesus in the position of teaching the Sermon on the Mount, as if off on the side there is something different about the heaven and light that he is referring to, and kind of illuminating for the sake of these people in this time. I think that's just an interesting sidelight, and so much the temple, you see, isn't that interesting that they're really the same in so many ways? Anyway, okay, so now that we've done that, let's go upstairs. And when we go up there, we get one of the really loved ones. Some of the people that, some of you who have sent me information about, oh, I love the window of the children, and what that suggests and everything. So it's really nice to come to this and say, yep, that's a window about Jesus saying, let the children come to me. And this is the iconographic source. Let the children come to me. And that's exactly what it says right there. But we know, see, if it just says that, that's all we start to think about, children and Jesus. But if we read the bigger picture, let the little children come to me, for of such of these, the kingdom of God is made. It means adults have to be like children too. In what way? How are we to learn and discover? Well, so this breathes not just with child interest in Jesus, but our interest in ourselves and our own growth and our own development of this way. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing. I'd like to also note that in the tops of these lancet windows, look at this, cup and lamp, cup and lamp, lamp, cup and lamp, cup, lamp, cross. And around that cross is the crown of thorns. And in the middle of it, I don't have a detail, is a star. And up above, look at these little, what are those? Fill in the blanks, unimportant. Well, I think they might be suggesting Pentecost. tongues of fire, light, illumination, energy. I'm not going to press that any further, but I think that's really a kind of suggestive reality there. Let's go a little closer and examine this, because there's another thing that's beginning to happen. The wreath. I am the vine, you are the branches. One of Jesus' teachings. It's not so simple just to think that's a decoration. No, I am the vine, you are the branches. So now we begin to think that there's something greater still, even in the decorative parts of this. There's a reference that brings about the energy of love and compassion, the energy of belonging and developing. As well, here's the energy of the children coming to Jesus, and we see the context of that. Oh, wait a second, as we get closer, there are some other interesting things. There's a shepherd back there, and the sheep. And oh, there's some really nice details of this. What is that all about? What new thoughts do we have when we come close and see the gesture of the hand on the child, the hand holding the child, the adults who are focused, not as children now, but as adults who embody childlike curiosity, childlike attachment, childlike love and affection. You get the point. This is more than, and it intends our own presence in this process as well. And this is one of the details I like in the lower left. This mother and child holds the, see that, the flowers, and the other child seems to have a head dress of really wonderful flowers on her hair. But you see the general affection that is shared in this as well. And then off on the right, oh my goodness, that shepherd with all those sheep. It makes you think about this story belonging to the story down below, doesn't it? Jesus says, I'm the good shepherd. Whoop, get up top. And you still got the sheep, and you still got the shepherd. And the other thing that interests me is this figure down in the lower right. You see that child holding the palm branch? Fascinating. What does that make you think of? Right, the Palm Sunday kind of experience. So here you have brought together not just Jesus and the children, but you've got sheep, you've got adults learning, and you've got this reference to Palm Sunday itself. And now I go back up to the branches, to the vine, wreathed in a vine, and that's John 15. And it begins with, I am the vine. Wait a minute. That one in the heraldic position down below began with the same thing, didn't it? I am the good shepherd. And when we come to the Sermon on the Mount, we have a similar kind of thing where Jesus thinks about himself being the light and the light of the world, but he shifts that and includes that. He says, you are the light of the world. Don't forget that. That's what makes me think that every one of the I am passages where Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branch, he's also meaning you to say the same thing, just like he said in the Sermon on the Mount, you are the light of the world. So you should be able to say, I'm the vine, along with Jesus. It's not so simple to get by with the doctrinal statement, where we praise and worship and magnify the name of the Lord without also understanding this responsible life of taking on that same kind of thing and attitude, being the good shepherd, being the vine, being the one who can say, as God loves me, so I love you. Abide in my love. You're my friends if we do together the things that are part of the Spirit's presence. Well, that's my understanding. So let's move on now over to the right side. And here we get a similar composition, those same kind of pointed figure thoughts down below, where the tops of the lancet windows lift the circle and the rose window, but now it's circled with an absolutely beautiful vine, seems, of lilies. And the lily represents two things, usually thought about, especially in Protestant circles, as referencing the resurrection that we're going to see later down below, but it also has to do with the mark of purity of life. And as we look now and get a little more focus on the circle, we see that Jesus and the woman at the well is the subject matter within this vine. And when we focus even closer, we get to start reading the same thing. The location, well, we see it's the well. Garments, we can tell Jesus has that red garment. Necklace on the woman, oh, does that speak of her wealth or of her receiving gifts of the many men who loved her? Or did you read that part of the story? What about the eyes and the way Jesus' eyes look directly and confront her? And her eyes do the same. What is the connection between Jesus and the woman? And how are they connected? What kind of energy exists between the two? Then, of course, we see the water. And right beneath Jesus' lifted finger, we see an axis going straight down to the water that goes down. We see the pitcher that is evidently full of the water. And we see these gestures that are gestures of very significant meaning. Jesus has the teaching gesture. You know, just in case you doubt my teaching capacities, here I raise my finger as if get the point, right? So Jesus lifts the finger to have some illumination, the water that he gives, because now I give you water. I am the living water. Okay, so let's see, there's something else. Let's look at the hands. That's his point there. And down here, we see Jesus' relaxed hand on the staff. Now, this relaxed hand corresponds to a hand that she has that is raised and cocked. It's the cocked hand. I always used to teach and get my students to kinesthetically enjoy the art. And by kinesthetic enjoyment, it means you had to cock your own hand. So go ahead, take your hand, cock your hand and say, oh, now what does that cocked hand mean? And if you look in Italian art through the years, very soon they developed this notion of the cocked hand as a way of saying welcome. If a woman might be perceived in a doorway, she would cock her hand as a way of saying welcome. Welcome to my home. And I'll bet some of you do that too. Hey, so good to see you. Welcome. And then we extend from there for the hug or the affection that we wish to express. I think that gesture is a gesture of welcome, or thank you for the information, or I receive it into myself. And The hand that's holding the pitcher now is a hand that rests on the very water that she has gotten to give to Jesus, and she's received something else in return, the living water that he offers. Oh, you want to see something, by the way, that I think is really a very nice touch of Povey? Look at Jesus' foot extended. See that down there? There's a shadow from the staff that covers his foot. Do you see that shadow? It's a very nice, it's right where my pointer is now. I think that's a very nice little touch of Povey, including that in this kind of representation. My, there we go. I'm not able to get the next one. I'm sorry about this. There we go. I wanted to show you a different story, different representation of Jesus and the woman at the well. And this is by Rembrandt. Check this out. Look at how Rembrandt has Jesus teaching. It's less authoritative. It's less, I have the truth, and it's much more expressive. As if Jesus is just taking a peek at the water in the well, and look at that hand that gestures and hovers over that water. And then the gesture that holds and says, you know what? I have some water that I can give you, and it's different from this water. I have something I want you to know. Boy, this is a very different picture, very different reading of the story itself. But I thought you might enjoy seeing that. And I say that because iconography develops in time. There is the tradition, the written story, but there is always the rereading of that text. And when you add both of those together, you sometimes get a new image for a new time. And I want to show you a new image for a new time. Here's Jesus and the woman at the well. And it's 1994 Chester Cathedral in Great Britain. Do you see the woman? Whoa! Do you see Jesus? They serve as a circle. And now they hold the bowl of water between them. Look at that. Both of them have their hands on the water. Jesus gives the water to the woman gives the water to Jesus. There's an affection that builds up, and now those two are charged with energy in the relationship they share. I think it's incredible interpretation of Jesus and the woman at the well, and literally a well, and in the courtyard of the church at that cathedral. Thought you might like that, just in case you ever have some idea of having a contemporary reading of Scripture. So here we are. Let's go downstairs and hurry through this. The central panels are resurrection. On the left, Jesus takes the leave of the woman. On the right, ascension. And we're doing this quickly now because we've already learned to read these images. On the left, we'll go first, and there we see it's not a biblical story. It comes out of Meditations of the Life of Christ, which is a 14th century story from the Italians, and the Italians love these emotional moments. And I'll tell you, this is a great one, where Jesus, and in the story, it's Jesus is carrying the cross to Golgotha. But They meet in their eyes. She's so anguished. Jesus is famished, and their eyes meet, and neither of them can say a word. Well, Povey has taken that and said, no, let's just have Christ meeting with his mother. And it looks like they're in affectionate relationship. Stop here a moment. Their eyes are meeting, and there is absolutely no word associated. So he's being faithful to the meditations on the life of Christ, at the same time placing that in the resurrection story, where Jesus, instead of a narrative of he substitutes a narrative for the crucifixion. Here is the substitute. And so you look at that and you say, oh yeah, but you have to know this story to know that it's a substitute. And it's the fourth station of the cross that we now have in our chapel gallery that is part of Greg Palestri's installation called Stations of the Cross. And we see that in this particular station. Okay, let's go to the center. Now we see this, and this is what we come in all the time. On the left side, look at that hand gesture welcoming the story. See it? Now you know it. It's a cocked hand that says, welcome. What's she welcoming? Whoop, way over here, the message of the angel that says, hey, he's raised from the dead. So that's the welcome. In her other hand, you see how she has the little jar of ointment? That's why they came to the Mary and the other Mary. That's why they came to the tomb in the first place, to embalm Jesus. So here's this double message right there. Then you come here, and this is prayer, what I call prayer on the run. She's running right down to the message that she's receiving from the angel. And I presume this is Mary Magdalene in the story. This is the other Mary. This is Mary Magdalene. And they come to the angel, and the angel says, he is raised. Now, I love the white garment, but I equally love the darkness of the tomb. It belongs. And between the two of them is the lily that represents the resurrection. So here we have a wonderful combination of iconography for the reading of the richness of this resurrection story. The empty dark, the lilies of the risen Christ, pointing up to the truth, the prayer that comes to, on the run, see it, and the surprised welcome for the new story that's been told. Now, on the right is the Ascension. And here, wait a second, is that a heraldic composition? It feels like this is a pronouncement. I believe in the ascension of Jesus Christ, that kind of hard, fast doctrinal statement. But wait just a second. It's softened by a quote down at the bottom that says, I go to prepare a place for you. And that does not come at the ascension story narrative in the Gospels and in the book of Acts. Rather, it comes from John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. But that word believe is really trust. It's not believe, it's trust. Pisteo, which is the Greek word for trust. Let not your hearts be troubled. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And better yet, trust God. For I am the way, the truth, and the life. trust me, you can be the way, the truth, and the life too. And with that, this window winds up being a really pivotal window for us as people of faith and people of trust and people who claim to understand something of how the grace of God has been among us and enabled us to be the way and walk the way, to be truth and to experience truth in a very significant way, to follow Jesus, but to be in some way our own understanding and embodiment as well. Can we go over to the right now and see the bottom of the next window? And oh, it's full of symbols. Very simple, full light. And there's a cross in the center. And we say, oh, Jesus said, take up your cross. Remember? What in the world did he mean by that? Oh, we've been trying to figure that out and live it ever since, haven't we? Did he mean, well, I won't preach on that. Crown. There are crowns on this and on this window. What are they? Well, in the book of James, whoops, I need an S. You endure the trial, you receive a crown. The trial of life, the trial of bearing your cross. And then in the left and in the right are two letters from the Greek alphabet that come as an I am statement in the book of Revelation. And in the vision, there is Jesus saying, I am the Alpha and Omega. Well, okay, there's the beginning and the end of the alphabet, the meaning of life itself. There it is. And then we begin to see that there is really something significant here. Up, the lamp. Down at the bottom, the lamp. Each window has a lamp that means you, well, I think it means, don't forget, you are the light of the world. In the window that's across the sanctuary, we see, don't forget, Jesus teaching the Matthew Sermon on the Mount, where he very specifically says, you are the light of the world. So this window is pretty significant affirmation of totality. And then we go up above and we see, again, what I think is sort of the grand wonder statement of the windows in our worship area. The symbols are cup, cross, crown. Cup to the cross to the crown. That axis is repeated 4 times, and the one below it is just the lamp that lifts up to the crown. That is an affirmation of you. Take your cup, be the light, heed the cross, go to the crown, which is a kind of affirmation of a life well lived. So I want to say that those kind of axes are invitations. The circle is another. And can I tell you a circle that I love to refer to? Nicholas of Cusa. I think it's the 15th century or so. A mystic in the church said that God is a circle. The center is everywhere, and the circumference is nowhere. You cannot contain the circle that is God. But there's an energy that comes from the center being everywhere. That means center here, center there, center in you, center in, center in. So wherever we go, we wind up being at the center of where God is. And the circle contains, it's not contained. There is no circumference. So here we are in a circle that I want to suggest it represents that notion from Nicholas of Cusa, where the center is everywhere, that's where you are. And those lilies just grow out and you think they're contained? No, 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 no. They're still growing. They're still pressing the outside. That circle's getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And our challenge is to know it and recognize it in the life that we live. Last comment I want to make is 12. There are 12 sections in there, which obviously comes in reference to some of the circularity of our time. You know, the 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 in the clocks that used to be, which are no more, but very much rooted in that 19th, 20th century. We've got digital clocks now, but they went on 12s then, and the hands of the clock that go round and round as the wheel turns and spins and moves. Well, there it is. So I want to say that even when we're not there, the windows continue to transform what the light is, what light there is. And our invitation is to be the window through whom the light can shine, and how we can express and find ways for ourselves to be the windows of this light of God's grace as well. So that's the kind of thing that I think about when I see the windows. And I'm really glad to be able to share a little bit of it with you now too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheldon. That was wonderful. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Can you hear me
yes.
now too?
I can hear you, Nancy.
Yes.
Sheldon, I'm going to take your screen off screen share, okay?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. That was amazing, Sheldon. I don't even know where to start, but thank you. Everyone who's been sitting here just glued to your screen, just shake and stand up or do whatever you have to do, because I think we're going to have some really good questions and answers. So just go ahead and unmute yourself when you have a question, get our attention by waving, and Sheldon, you can watch the screen and take it on your own. And Nan is going to, she's live at the church, and if there is
alive,
she may attempt to actually take a picture of a window if you have a specific question about a part of a window. We'll see. We'll make her run up and down stairs. And I see Susan already has her hand up. So I'm going to start with Susan, and then Sheldon, you just take it from there.
I just wanted to ask you, you said this is going to be recorded. If I wanted to see it again, is it going to be on the church website, or where would I find it?
Yes, Andre said that he's going to work on making it available tomorrow. So it will be on the website. Somehow we'll get the word out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is El Ray, and on the window that has the angel sitting on the tomb and holding the lily, I noticed that the lily is shaped like the cross. And any comment?
Oh no, but that's the kind of wonderful bringing together of the intentions of our faith. You know, it's any symbol. There's a difference between a sign and a symbol, and the sign means one thing, but the symbol has a richness, dynamic life to it, so that the symbol has several meanings. And when you can see that and double it up and say, oh, it's cross and resurrection, that's the beauty of our association capacity. And it's a symbol indeed.
Nancy, I have a question. This is Bruce.
Yeah.
Go ahead
Speak.
and ask.
Sheldon, can you talk a little bit or speculate maybe about the crafting of the windows? How much of that was done by the Povey brothers? How much of that was done by Reverend Clapp and the congregation, do you think? Whose messages are being displayed there?
I haven't, I've asked that question with you, but I haven't really explored how that came about. I have a feeling that it's very much, whether it's Clapp or the subsequent minister, because the windows weren't completed until 1910. So I expect that money came in for the building, and once the building was in, then came some money, and I think Clapp finished his tenure here in 94. And so 1894, so he's out of the picture, and here comes the possibility of the windows. So whether or not they planned them with the building itself, or whether they planned them later, once they, had the energy of the building being completed, I can only speculate at this point. I don't know for sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just wondered, it is sort of a chicken and egg. Did they
Right.
build the building to accommodate the windows and
Oh,
then
yeah.
have an idea about what the windows would be? Or did they just go out and find the Povey brothers who put their, interpretations into what the windows were going to be?
Well, I think judging by the Povey windows that are in the other two churches nearby, Christian Church has all Povey windows, and the First Presbyterian does. There's not a duplication. So I sort of wonder if it's not recognizing a little bit about what Povey might want and have available, but also I don't want to be the Christian Church and I don't want to be First Pres. So you've got some kind of jockeying for statements. However, I think our windows are all those I am windows. I am good shepherd. I am the vine. I am the resurrection and life. I am living water. I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. Well, that's a real unifying nature of these windows that says somebody was in charge of this, and I think somebody had to be pretty knowledgeable about biblical kind of ideas and theology of church, theology of Jesus, to make sure that that kind of consistency is there. It's not, when I first came in, I said, oh, what does this have to do with anything? How do the children relate to the Alpha and Omega? And then all of a sudden it started to make sense. It's all Jesus. We're all right in the body of Christ. I am is right here. Interesting, huh? So I'm sure that it's a biblical scholar that's at work in helping to choose and design.
Elaine, did you have something to add to that? I know
Yeah,
you've
I
done
think
some research.
the Povey brothers, it's an old website that I have information from, but the people at the church in Oregon City, Atkinson Memorial, had done a lot of research, and it doesn't really say anything about where the Poveys got their ideas for the windows, but they were, I'm looking at my jottings. David, one of the brothers, was at Cooper Union Institute of Art for 5 years, and they traveled throughout Europe and they studied stained glass and the early designs. They even studied Frank Lloyd Wright stuff. And there's way more than just churches, the 3 churches downtown that have Povey windows.
Right.
The Pittock Mansion, Huber's, the Elsinore Theater in Salem.
Are those Christian?
There's a church in the Dalles. Pardon?
Are those Christian iconography in those other locations? I don't think,
I don't think, not necessarily,
I
but
don't think so.
no. And then there's also the is it the Greenwood Estate in Salem that has
Right.
Povey windows too? So, but I don't think anybody really knows where the Povey brothers got their design ideas for the church windows. So,
Yeah, obviously they, Plockhorst and Heinrich Hoffmann, they got ideas from them. but
do you know that for sure though?
What's that?
Do you know that for sure? Are you just sort of making an educated guess?
I think it's educated, but it's too obvious for it to not be true. Those, as you look at the glass, those are so nearly exact. It cannot not be.
Okay, maybe so.
Belong.
Yeah, but you don't really know unless you were able to interview the Povey brothers themselves. So,
well, you know, no, I have to say in this particular instance with the Good Shepherd, that's very exact. The sheep are very in the same positions. His hands are in the same positions.
okay, maybe so.
And none of us saw Jesus, so we don't know how Jesus really was Good Shepherd. So
yeah,
it had to be.
Yeah.
That's one of those things, and one of the things I really want to do is try to find why these stained glass people in the 19th and early 20th century, what resource were they had become available to them? You know, like were
Resource for what?
Newspapers or prints or what kind of so that Hoffmann and Plockhorst were available to them. I'd love to see that. That would be a nice thing.
Well, in some of the research from this Atkinson Memorial Church, it says that the Povey brothers traveled throughout Europe. And so like you're saying, they probably saw some of these other paintings and they looked at stained glass in Europe too. Right. So,
yep.
So anyway.
The Heinrich Hoffmann is probably not a big thing for European, the German. I think that Hoffmann became really a big deal here in our country through the church in the Rockefeller Church in New York City. they took in a lot of those paintings, and anyway, I think that's right. I think there are a lot of European ideas. Obviously, they're artists. They're aware of art and significant.
Okay, and then I don't know if you know, there was a daughter of the Povey brothers, Polly Povey, and this is again from that website from the Atkinson Church. And one of the people from the church, this Herb Beals that wrote this, had interviewed her, but she died before they could really get any real significant or real verified information from her about her father. So anyway.
Well, hey, that's good. Thanks for sharing that. That's a great, that's another part of how this all fits together too.
Yeah, yeah. So, and like the other places, the Rose City Park Methodist has, I guess, a Povey window at least too.
Right.
So
there are a lot of churches,
but they weren't signed. It also says early on, the Povey brothers never signed their windows.
Yeah.
So it's hard to determine or hard to find which ones are really Povey brother windows.
Yeah. Ours are signed, aren't they? It's kind of nice.
I don't know.
Huh?
Are they? I don't know.
Yeah, they had. There's in the children's only one that I could find, but there's a little mark where they say Povey window 1910.
Okay.
And so it's pretty nice.
I'll go find that.
Yeah,
I
it's
see.
upstairs
Oh,
at the rose window.
I see Leslie and Margaret and Susan all have their hands up. So let's go Leslie, Margaret, Susan for questions. Then they can put their arms down, unless they're just stretching.
My question, I have always seen Frank Lloyd Wright in those windows, especially in the one that, lamp.
Oh, the lily window? I
Yeah.
call it the lily window.
No, the straight up and down ones. I'm sorry, I just don't remember the names, but I've always seen it. So that was just a comment. But I was interested in your idea. How does one how do you see the difference between a proclamation and an expression or an invitation? Because I'm thinking particularly of the woman at the well
Mhm.
and the sort of scolding. To me, that was not an invitation. That was a like, listen to me, lady. And whereby Rembrandt, in his interpretation of that,
Oh,
to me, I saw something very different from what you
oh,
saw. What I saw was Jesus welcoming her ideas.
yeah.
I saw it more in the way of that contemporary sculpture, which Nan and I both noticed was a Mobius strip.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
sculpture. Did you see that? That it was
Yeah, yeah.
an infinity idea. So I'm a Gemini too, so I can see things from many different angles. And
That's,
I don't know that. I'm thinking of Nazi imagery and the swastika, and I'm going, what is that? Is that a proclamation or is it an expression?
right.
And I know we have a lot of negative associations about that, but it's also a beautiful symbol. So, yeah.
That's right. And it's really interesting. That's part of what you bring to these windows, and or what you bring to any art, is you bring a whole life that is not the artist. Artists have intentions. Sometimes I see things and man, that's way off from whatever was intended, but that's the dynamic of artistic work. And when you look at these windows, that's why I wanted to make sure that at least that tension is there between what the artist might be trying to do with a proclamation, statement of doctrinal belief, versus this, what's the invitation to involve me in some kind of trust that's faith, not belief, you know? And I think Rembrandt is very much a faithful person. His art is by far faith related. And there's very seldom do you come to a belief doctrinal statement hard and fast. But we in our church have a lot of faithful people. We don't necessarily have a lot of believers.
Yeah.
You know?
I think I'm probably one of those.
Yeah. And there are some that are believers, and that's a very different kind of thing. That's and then we find the hard and fast rules that or doctrines that become us. But I think you're right. I think there are attractions. Thanks for thinking about that. Yeah.
And Margaret?
Unmute, Margaret.
And of course you're muted.
My question had more to do with who decides what goes into the window. You know, is it a request of the person paying the money to build the window and says, you know, I want something from the 23rd Psalm, or you know, does the pastor of the church have authority, or is it the Povey brothers who have a whole book of passages and maybe related paintings. And they say, well, how about this one? So what do you know about that?
That's called the question of commissions.
Yes.
You know, where the commissioning body frequently has a determination involved, and I you know, it'd be really nice to know a whole lot more about that. And so maybe digging through some of the words that we find in the record, we can find some more of that. It's so hard to know. I'd love to hear some sermons from Clapp and from whoever followed him, and to know whether these windows were commissioned with the building, or whether they were commissioned as things went along. And all I know is the building was done in 1890s and the windows were finished in 1910. So that's maybe a 15-year period, right?
There's a tradition in churches with stained glass also. Do you know anything about that?
The
tradition is to put in windows, and who gets to decide?
Right. Well, the deciding, when you go back to the 12th century, 11th, and all of those would be done by the abbot or the head priest of a Roman Catholic church, for sure. It was very commissioning was in order to have those windows be something that would be consistent with the theology of that church. And the Roman Catholic Church would be in control of it.
Yeah.
Well, you get into Protestant churches, and we began, I think we took over that same sort of attitude. And my hunch is that the church allowed Clapp or subsequent minister to help define what was there. But the other factor is what's available for Povey.
Right.
What's he able to do?
Yeah.
What are the Povey window people able to accomplish? So it's very possible. I would love to be a part of that conversation where maybe Clapp says to Covey or the other minister, hey, you know, I happened to be in New York and I saw Heinrich Hoffmann's painting of Jesus with the rich young ruler. Can you put that in someplace?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he did. It's too exact, you know, but they omitted certain things, as I pointed out.
Yeah.
So it happens, and it would be pretty lively. I know that when I've studied commissions of earlier, like during the Renaissance, those are frequently the commissioner is very much involved, telling them exactly what they should do. And add my portrait here, would you?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Susan, you had the next question.
Well, I grew up in Carlton First Baptist Church in the Willamette Valley, and it's 150 years old. And even though on the website, the Povey Brothers website, it doesn't mention Carlton First Baptist, I've always known that those were Povey windows.
Yeah.
There's like 8, maybe, I don't know, 4 on one side and 4 on another on the end of the church that are the long rectangular windows. But the interesting thing to me is that 2 of the images are exactly the same as our windows. One is the Jesus is the Good Shepherd. Yeah. And as far as I can remember, that window is pretty much the same as the one in our church. And then Jesus blesses the children, the round window. Yeah. Just took the image of Jesus and I think 2 of the children is my memory, and made a long rectangular window out of it. Ah. So I have this picture of the Povey brothers with people come in and say, well, can I look at what you have available, and maybe they had a book that showed the pictures that were available. And
Maybe.
anyway, so I don't really have a question, but I always thought it was interesting to come to this church, and here are at least two of the windows that I grew up with.
Yeah, you're home.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to see that sometime and experience what some of these other churches and what the style is that gets pictured again. Yeah, it'd be interesting. Thanks. Hey, you remind me of something, by the way. I hope that all of you will write down some of this stuff for yourself and kind of help me compile interests and questions that you have that help to bring this to light. Sort of the dynamic of our relationship with the space in which we live in our faith experience. Does that make sense? So I ask you that seriously, so that some people have already done that, and I have just some really interesting things that have been said.
I think it's going to be an ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
Anne, you had a question.
It's not exactly a question, but it's like Leslie, the woman at the well. I also saw Christ as telling her, and this gesture to me was, I mean, you said kinesthetically experience it. When I do this, it's kind of like, oh, and I'm protecting myself a little bit. And it's also kind of like, really, is that what you said? You know, and do I have to believe that? Yeah. To me, that's what this gesture is. Just my kinesthetic experience.
If it changes so that it's this way and not this way.
Well, either way, for me, I'm protecting myself.
Yeah.
Oh. I was kind of
oh, kind of pushing away.
Well, I'm not pushing away necessarily. This is holding you there, and this is holding me here. It's like, oh, you know, is that what you really meant? Don't come too close to me because I'm not sure I'm with you.
Yeah, could be. Well, that's the life of response, and you know the stories wind up having suggestions, and how do you fit them in, and how do you and it fits both ways in some sense in that story, because there is that surprise element that she pushes away in a kind of self-protective way. And then the story resolves in she's accepted the whole thing. And she goes back to her family, her community, and tells them, hey, you got to see this guy. Mm-hmm. So when you know all of that, there's a kind of both and, isn't there?
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
Christina, you had a question.
Yeah. So I was just noticing the details you mentioned, like in the crosses and everything, where there's it's the crown of thorns and then the star. Is that alluding to the Star of David?
Oh, no, that's a 5-pointed star.
Oh.
So it's interesting that I checked all that out. There's a slightly different one in the west window, but it's still 5-pointed. And so a very significant difference. And I think those stars are, they could, who knows? There's the reference to the bright and morning star in the Hebrew scriptures. And there's also there's a great image in the book of Revelation. Oh yeah, there you go. There's the west window. See how that triangles?
Yeah.
And that's a slightly different one from the other, but you get cross and crown and you get star. And that star, there's an image in the book of Revelation of this woman, I forget what it is, Revelation 12 or something. There's a woman who stands there and she has a crown with stars in the crown. And so there's this beautiful kind of reference to, you know, eternity. So you work your way through the cross and the crown of thorns to the crown, the star that's in your crown in glory.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the peace lilies, the lilies, you said that they represented a clock. Do they not also connect with like the 12 apostles?
Oh, the 12?
Yeah.
And I even
Oh,
think
yeah.
you
Yeah, I
can see
said
the
that it,
zodiac too.
yeah, I said that the reference to time. Yes, of course, the 12 apostles. Yes, of course, there are many 12s in our life, many 12s. And so it's significant that that's there. But it's who knows what that is, why that happens. It sure has kept us from having kept us a long time from any decimal division of time until we get to the you know, when we could digitalize, and then we suddenly are in, oh, they're tenths of seconds. But we didn't divide it into twelfths of seconds. We did it in decimal. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
And then my last question is, I noticed that in a variety of different windows, there are palm trees in the background. So are they indicative of the climate and area that the windows are describing, or are they also always suggesting Palm Sunday?
Oh, no, yeah, that's right. I think that's kind of hints of where do palm trees grow? And is that a Middle East palm tree? Kind of reference to that very different climate and location. That's an iconographical question you ask. You know, and it's not Florida. And but it makes you think of Florida or Southern California. But I think it's more the kind of reference to that location that's out in the Middle East. Those of you who have been to the Middle East, are there palm trees there?
I wouldn't think so.
That's a mountain, and then there seems like that there's a building there. Everybody's
I think
Was
that's
that your last question, Christina? Because I think Nan is our next.
Yeah, that was
next
my
on
last
the list.
Well, I was just going to answer Sheldon's question about are there palm trees in the Middle East? I don't know. I haven't been there, but I imagine most of it is too dry. It's only near water sources.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was going to say where I saw them was sort of oasis type
right.
settings. Yeah.
Where the water is, there's the palm tree. So that kind of becomes a source of water, huh? Living water. No wonder that well is such an important thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Nan, did you have another question?
I did. I'm walking to the window, the one of the Ascension. I'm walking to it right now. I've always thought that God, can you hear me? I'm in a terrible spot. Okay. I've always thought that Jesus looked different from all the other Jesuses, and he looks bald to me. And it made me wonder if perhaps he is a portrait
don't see
of, I'm struggling to get through the door. There we go.
He's running downstairs. Be careful.
Yeah, I have to be super careful. This
The
guy,
roving reporter.
yeah, that's it. I think this guy, this Jesus, looks really different from almost any other Jesus I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I have wondered if he is a portrait of Mr. Clapp or Mr. Povey or the guy who gave a bunch of money or
Well,
do you have any? Okay.
No, but I think that's true. It's really a portrait full of light, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And notice, I always get interested in the fact that angels look so feminine, and yet Gabriel and other angel names are masculine, and so it's just a curious kind of iconographical switch as we go through time.
I think this angel right here doesn't look so girly. He might even have a little hair on his chest there.
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe that speaks to the gender neutral aspect of angel.
Right.
Yeah. Non-binary. Yeah.
Nancy, can I interrupt while Nan is at that window? This is Bruce. There is a piece of glass that's kind of reddish rose colored that absolutely glows in the summer before the solstice that I've seen during choir rehearsals. I don't know if others have seen it.
Yeah. I was just telling Sheldon about that. Is it this one here?
I don't know where I thought it was a little more to the right, but people in the choir during rehearsals will be able to see it because it just pops at one point here.
Yeah, these windows just come alive at dusk, at sunset in the summer.
The Povey brothers really liked those kinds of colors, the bright golds and blues and reds.
And you're right that when the sun sets and lowers especially around June and July, that window in the west must just come boom.
Mm-hmm.
It really does.
Very beautiful.
Can I?
Oh.
Yeah, hi. Speaking of iconography changes, I noticed that on the Ascension and maybe one of the others, there is no cross in the halo of Jesus. In one or two of the others, I noticed it was there, and that was always a big basic symbol. Why was that left out? Or is that just a Protestant change?
That's a good question in terms of the variety of representation. Sometimes it's both. I mean, it's either one, obviously, and the presence of the cross in the halo is very much that history of the Roman Catholic representation. Although I've seen paintings where it's not that at all, but Jesus has, like the Plockhorst one, is radiating light. It's this kind of light that illuminates the head, which is a very different way. So it goes any way, a variety of ways the artist might choose, or the expectation. I think when it's a cross in the halo, it sure feels much more of like what I've called the belief statement, doesn't it? And the halo of light seems to at least suggest maybe a different kind of way of approaching. Yeah, you see, that's a nice way to cut the glass so that the glass doesn't fall apart too. It's a nice thing to have there.
Rachel, I think you have a question.
Yeah, actually, more of a comment, and it happens to be about halos as well. In the west lower floor, where there's the sequence of events, Jesus takes leave of his mother. In that case, Jesus has a halo, and also the way that the landscape, there's a shape of a halo above that whole piece in brown that doesn't happen in any of the others. And then we have the halo on Jesus as he's ascending on the far right side. In the middle three, there's a halo on the angel, which isn't surprising. But in the very middle, there's a halo on Mary Magdalene, which is surprising, at least to me. I'm thinking, especially at that period of time, around the turn of that century, it's hard for me to imagine that Mary Magdalene would have as much respect within the Protestant tradition that she has, that's clearly shown to her here, especially with all the drapery. Anyway, I think it's quite wonderful.
Yeah, that is. And I'm just assuming that that's Mary Magdalene because of the two Marys, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, that Mary Magdalene is the only one who could be a saint within the Roman Catholic Church. But this is really an interesting question, isn't it? Because here's Roman Catholic iconography coming to us, and we adapt it.
Can we just look over to the left? Is her clothing similar to the Virgin Mary, the Mother Mary? No, not at all. But the Mother Mary is wearing the traditional red that was used. So I think she has to be, I agree with you that she's Mary Magdalene in the center.
Yeah. These are different Marys. These are not Mary the Mother. Mary the Mother is only on the left.
That's what I mean, yeah. The left, that's obviously Mary the Mother. So she has the red, almost red dress. Yeah. And then what's interesting to me as well is that Mary Magdalene is at the absolute center of this whole story.
Right.
In this piece, so.
And she, boy, we know now that she played an absolutely critical role in the life of the early followers of Jesus after his death. She was the one in the garden vision who wanted to grab hold of Jesus, and Jesus' response was, "Don't grab hold of me." And she didn't, and she evidently moved within the community a very affirming of the life of faith, as opposed to the life of, doctrinal integrity. Don't grab hold of Jesus, but let that stuff happen. Let the faith happen. Don't grab hold. And she was pretty obedient about that, it seems. Probably more so than most of us, or more so than the windows are sometimes.
And aren't there stories?
Sorry, Elaine. And I just want to make sure we save a little time for Paris to plug next month, but go ahead, Elaine.
Oh, I just was saying about Mary Magdalene, there have been stories like novels about Mary Magdalene being a lover of Jesus. So that could be another reason that she would be in the center, maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's another association for sure.
I think she exemplifies the ultimate believer. And so, of course, she's at the center because she believes more than anyone.
Yeah. And wasn't it interesting to see that Chester Cathedral piece, so that the woman at the well, man, my goodness, that's charged with eros. It's an erotic kind of, oh man, suddenly it's not erotic just with sexual desire, but with the desire of, I want to be one. I want to be whole. And we miss that so often out of our fear of sexual reference. But I think that circle, I love it. I was really touched by its significance. And I think Mary Magdalene is a good example of that, wanting to be one with. And what does that mean? Yeah. Thanks.
I think I'm going to wrap up the stained glass portion here.
Good.
Boy, Sheldon, and your runner here at the church, Nan. But this was an incredible experience, and it will be recorded, and we'll promote where you can watch it or have other people watch it. I think anybody who comes to our church should know this, should have this.
And there's more.
Yeah. And and aren't you planning to put this all in a book form?
Right. we'll figure out how to do that in time too, and let it grow, and kind of the significance of how we respond and make this part of us. I think that's important.
And it is so nice to feel like we're in the building.
Yeah. Yes.
That was really nice. So thank you, Nan, for running around and taking us indoors. And
my privilege.
On that, I'm going to send it over to Paris, and she's going to tell us what we're doing next month, which is nothing like this at all.